The wind howled like a wounded animal across the Colorado mountainside, driving snow horizontally through the air with such force that it stung exposed skin like tiny needles. Carter Williams pulled his collar higher against his weathered face, squinting through the white chaos that had descended upon Millbrook with the fury of nature's worst temper. The forecast had called for 6 inches. They'd gotten 3 feet in the last 12 hours, and it showed no signs of stopping. Beside him, Rex moved through the drifts with practiced efficiency, his German Shepherd frame cutting a path through snow that reached nearly to his chest. The dog's breath formed small clouds that were instantly torn away by the wind, but his amber eyes remained alert, scanning the white wilderness with the focus of a creature born for this work. 7 years of military service in Afghanistan had taught both of them to read the landscape for danger, though these days their enemies were usually nothing more threatening than the occasional coyote or the memories that still visited Carter in the depths of night. They were following the creek bed, or where Carter assumed the creek bed to be under all this snow, making their way toward Old Creek Bridge for their evening patrol. It was a ritual more than necessity, a way to mark the end of another day, to feel useful in a world that had seemed to lose its purpose after Sarah died. 3 years now, and the ache still caught him sometimes, sharp and unexpected as black ice. Rex suddenly stopped, his entire body going rigid. His ears swiveled forward, locked onto something ahead that Carter couldn't see through the swirling white. A low growl rumbled from deep in the dog's chest, barely audible above the wind but unmistakable to someone who'd lived with him for 5 years. "What is it, boy?" Carter's hand instinctively moved to his hip, where his sidearm rested under 3 layers of winter clothing. "Old habits." The dog moved forward cautiously, nose working despite the wind that should have scattered any scent to oblivion. Carter followed, trusting Rex's instincts more than his own eyes in this weather. As they crested a small rise, the skeletal frame of Old Creek Bridge materialized from the storm, its rusted beams catching snow in every joint and rivet. But it wasn't the bridge that had caught Rex's attention. 20 yards from the bridge's eastern approach, barely visible through the snow, was the unmistakable outline of a vehicle. Not just any vehicle, a police cruiser, its light bar dark and covered with a thick layer of white. The car had gone off the road, its front end buried in the embankment, driver's side door hanging open like a broken wing. Carter's pulse quickened. In weather like this, an accident could mean death in minutes, not hours. He pushed forward, Rex leading the way with renewed urgency. As they approached, Carter could see the story written in the snow. Tire tracks veering sharply off the road, the deep gouge where the car had hit the embankment, and something else that made his blood run cold, a trail of red leading from the open door. Already being covered by fresh snow but still visible, still fresh. The interior of the cruiser was a disaster. The windshield spider webbed with cracks radiating from a head-sized impact point. Blood on the steering wheel, the dashboard, pooled on the driver's seat. The radio hung by its cord, crackling with static, but no body. Carter's eyes followed the blood trail, which led around the back of the vehicle. That's where he found her. Officer Joanna Hayes was slumped against the rear tire, her uniform dark with blood from a gash on her forehead. Her skin had taken on the waxy pallor that preceded hypothermia, lips tinged blue, but her chest still rose and fell in shallow, irregular breaths. She'd managed to drag herself this far, seeking shelter from the wind behind the vehicle, but her strength had given out. Her service weapon was still holstered, her radio missing. "Ma'am? Officer?" Carter dropped to his knees beside her, pulling off his glove to check for a pulse at her neck, weak but present. Her eyes fluttered open at his touch, unfocused and glassy. "Badge. Number," she whispered, her voice barely audible. 4, 7, 9. "Save your strength," Carter said, already working to lift her. She was lighter than he expected, her body limp as he pulled her arm over his shoulder. "We need to get you warm." Rex had positioned himself between them and the tree line, his hackles raised, teeth bared at something in the darkness between the pines. Another growl, deeper this time, full of warning. Carter's instincts screamed danger, but he couldn't see anything through the storm. Whatever had Rex on edge would have to wait. The woman in his arms had minutes, maybe less. "Home, Rex," he commanded. And the dog reluctantly backed away from whatever he sensed, taking point as Carter began the torturous journey back to the ranch. Every step was a battle against the wind, against the snow that seemed determined to pull them down, against the dead weight of the unconscious officer who mumbled numbers and fragments of words he couldn't understand. The ranch house appeared through the storm like a ship through fog, its windows glowing amber with the warmth Carter had left behind. He'd never been more grateful for the sturdy construction, the thick walls his grandfather had built to withstand exactly this kind of weather. Rex bounded ahead, scratching at the door with unusual urgency. Inside, the contrast was jarring: sudden warmth, sudden quiet. The storm reduced to a muffled roar beyond the walls. Carter laid the officer on the couch, her uniform leaving wet, red stains on Sarah's favorite Afghan. No time for sentiment. He grabbed towels, blankets, the first aid kit from the bathroom. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, skills learned in field hospitals half a world away coming back as muscle memory. The head wound was superficial but messy, the kind that bled dramatically but wouldn't kill. More concerning was her body temperature, the way her breathing remained shallow, the bluish tint that hadn't left her lips. Carter stoked the fire until it roared, positioned her close enough to warm but not burn. He cleaned and bandaged the wound, checked for other injuries, found bruising on her ribs that suggested the airbag had deployed hard. Rex positioned himself at her feet, his body tense, eyes never leaving the windows. Whatever he'd sensed at the accident scene had followed them, at least in the dog's mind. Carter found himself checking his weapon, ensuring a round was chambered. The familiar weight was comforting. The officer stirred, eyes opening with more focus this time. She looked around wildly, hand going to her holster, finding it empty. "Easy," Carter said, hands raised peacefully. "You're safe. You were in an accident. I found you by Old Creek Bridge." Her eyes locked on his, studying his face with an intensity that seemed inappropriate for someone who'd just nearly died. Where am I?" "Carter Williams Ranch, about 2 miles from the bridge. The storm's too bad to get you to town, and calling for help." He gestured to the window, where the snow continued its assault. "No one's moving in this." She tried to sit up, winced, fell back. "My radio. Gone. Your cruiser's half buried. You're lucky I found you when I did." He handed her a mug of warm water, helped her take small sips. "What happened?" "That wasn't just sliding on ice." Something flickered in her eyes. Fear? Calculation? She took another sip instead of answering, her gaze drifting to Rex. The dog had moved closer, his intense stare fixed on her face with unusual interest. Most people, especially injured strangers, made Rex wary. But something about this woman had captured his attention in a different way. "I need to." She started to rise again, stopped when the room spun. "I need to report in." "In the morning," Carter said firmly. "When the storm breaks, right now, you need rest and warmth." He studied her face, the way her eyes kept moving to the windows, the door. "Unless there's something urgent?" "Someone else out there?" "No," she said quickly. Too quickly. "No one else." The stairs creaked, and both adults turned to see a small figure in dinosaur pajamas descending carefully, one hand on the rail. Benny's hair stuck up at odd angles, his father's cowlick multiplied by sleep. His eyes widened when he saw the stranger on their couch, the bandage on her head, the uniform. "Dad, is she okay?" Carter moved to intercept his son, but Benny was already approaching the couch, with the fearless curiosity of 7-year-olds. "She had an accident in the storm," Carter explained. "She's going to rest here tonight." Benny studied Officer Hayes with solemn eyes. "Like when Rex got hurt that time? And we had to keep him warm and quiet?" "Exactly like that." The boy nodded, accepting this explanation with the simple faith of childhood. He looked at Rex, who had moved even closer to the officer, his tail giving a single, tentative wag. "Rex likes her," Benny observed. "He doesn't like everybody." It was true. Rex's reaction was unusual, almost as if he recognized something in the injured officer. Carter filed this observation away, adding it to the growing list of things that didn't quite add up. "Back to bed, soldier," Carter said, ruffling his son's hair. "School might be canceled tomorrow, but bedtime isn't." Benny groaned but complied, pausing at the stairs. "She can have my breakfast tomorrow if she's hungry. The good cereal." After his son disappeared upstairs, Carter turned back to find the officer watching him with an expression he couldn't read. "He's a good kid," she said softly. "He has his moments." Carter pulled a chair closer, settled into it with his rifle within easy reach. "You should sleep. I'll keep watch." "You don't need to." "Ma'am, with all due respect, you show up in my territory half dead in a crashed cruiser, my dog acts like something followed us home, and you're jumpier than a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. So yeah, I'll keep watch." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded, settling back into the blankets. But Carter noticed she positioned herself so she could see both the door and windows, and her hand stayed close to where her weapon would have been. The night deepened, the storm continued its assault, and Carter settled in for what he suspected would be a long watch. Rex remained alert at the officer's feet, occasionally releasing soft whines that seemed directed at her, not at any external threat. Whatever secret she was carrying, whatever had really caused that accident, would have to wait until morning. The fire crackled and sparked, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Outside, something moved through the storm, or maybe it was just the wind playing tricks. But Rex's ears tracked it, whatever it was, and Carter's hand never strayed far from his weapon. Morning came slowly, the storm finally exhausting itself into occasional flurries. Gray light filtered through the windows, revealing a world transformed into an Arctic landscape. Drifts reached halfway up the first-floor windows, and Carter knew they weren't going anywhere for at least another day. Officer Hayes woke with a start, hand again going to her missing weapon. The movement disturbed Rex, who'd spent the night pressed against her legs, an unusual display of affection for the typically aloof dog. "Coffee?" Carter offered, already pouring a second mug. He'd been up most of the night, catching only brief dozes when his instincts allowed. She accepted gratefully, wrapping her hands around the warm ceramic. In daylight, he could see her more clearly mid-30s. Athletic build despite her current condition, eyes that held the kind of weight that came from seeing too much. There was something familiar about her, though Carter was certain they'd never met. "I should try the radio again," she said, though without much conviction. "Phones are down, power's out except for my generator, and the roads won't be clear for days." Carter sat across from her, his own coffee steaming. "Mind telling me what really happened out there?" She took a long sip, buying time. "The roads were bad. I lost control. Your tire tracks showed a sudden swerve, like you were avoiding something. Or someone." Her eyes sharpened. "You were a cop? Army, Afghanistan. 3 tours." He let that sink in. "I know what it looks like when someone's running from something. Or someone." Before she could respond, Benny bounded down the stairs, Rex immediately abandoning his post to greet the boy with tail wags and face licks. "Snow day," Benny announced triumphantly. "Dad, can we build a fort? Can she help?" He directed this last at Officer Hayes with hopeful eyes. "She needs to rest, buddy, and breakfast first." As Carter busied himself with scrambled eggs and toast, the simple meal feeling almost surreal given the tension of the night, he noticed Hayes watching Benny and Rex play. Her expression was unguarded for once, showing a deep sadness that vanished the moment she realized he was looking. "Rex doesn't usually warm up to strangers," Carter commented, setting a plate in front of her. She reached down to pet the dog, who leaned into her touch with obvious pleasure. "I've always been good with dogs. Had a German Shepherd growing up." It was a simple explanation, but something in her voice suggested more. Rex wasn't just tolerating her, he was acting like he knew her, like they had history. But that was impossible. The morning passed in deceptive normalcy. Benny chattered about school, about his friends, about the snow fort he was planning. Hayes listened with genuine interest, even managing a few smiles at his more elaborate plans. But Carter noticed how she tensed every time a chunk of snow fell from the roof, how her eyes tracked every sound. It was just after noon when Rex's demeanor changed. One moment he was lying by the fire, the next he was on his feet, a growl building in his throat as he stared at the front door. Carter was moving before his conscious mind processed the threat, pushing Benny behind him, hand on his weapon. The knock, when it came, was casual. 3 raps, pause, 2 more. "Carter, you in there?" Sheriff Rodriguez's voice, muffled by the door. "Heard you might have found something of ours." Carter felt Hayes go rigid behind him. When he glanced back, her face had gone pale, eyes wide with what could only be described as terror. She shook her head minutely, desperately. "Just a minute, Sheriff." Carter called back, his mind racing. Why would Rodriguez be out in this weather? How would he know about Hayes? And why was she terrified of her own sheriff? "Dad?" Benny's voice was small, confused. "Go upstairs, son, now." The tone brooked no argument, and Benny fled, Rex reluctantly following to protect the boy. Carter opened the door just enough to block any view inside. Rodriguez stood on the porch, snow on his shoulders, 2 deputies flanking him. Their hands rested casually on their weapons, but there was nothing casual about their position's tactical spacing, ready for violence. "Hell of a storm," Rodriguez said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Lost one of our officers last night. Her cruiser went off the road near Old Creek Bridge." "You haven't seen anything, have you? In that weather?" "I wasn't out looking for trouble." Rodriguez's smile widened. "No? Funny, thought I saw your tracks out there this morning. You and that dog of yours. Very distinctive pattern." Rex's pause. "Missing that toe from the IED makes him easy to track." Carter kept his expression neutral, but inside, alarms were screaming. Rodriguez had been to the scene, had tracked them here. This wasn't a casual check. Lots of people have dogs, Carter said. True. But not many have combat-trained German shepherds with missing toes. Rodriguez leaned slightly, trying to see past Carter. Mind if we come in? Warm up a bit? This is a welfare check, after all. Officer Hayes could be hurt, could need medical attention. House is a mess. My boy's sick. Maybe another time. Rodriguez's friendly mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold underneath. That's unfortunate. See, we're really concerned about Officer Hayes. She's new to the force, doesn't know the area well. Could have wandered off, confused. Could be dying somewhere. One of the deputies had moved slightly, improving his angle on the door. The other was scanning windows. They knew she was here. If I see anything, I'll call it in, Carter said, starting to close the door. Rodriguez's boot stopped it. There's another thing. Officer Hayes took something that doesn't belong to her when she left the station yesterday. Department property. We really need to get it back. Like I said, I can see her blood on your floor, Carter. The words hung in the frozen air. Carter looked down, saw the small stain that had soaked through Sarah's Afghan, visible from the doorway. When he looked back up, Rodriguez's hand was on his weapon. Step aside, soldier. This is police business. This is my home. You need a warrant. Exigent circumstances. Officer in distress. Rodriguez's voice had gone flat, professional. Step aside, or we'll move you. Carter calculated odds, angles, what would happen to Benny if this went bad. Before he could decide, Hayes appeared behind him. It's okay, she said, though her voice shook. I'll come with you, Sheriff. Rodriguez's smile returned, predatory now. Joanna, so glad you're safe. We were so worried. She moved past Carter, but as she did, she pressed something into his hand, a flash drive, small and black. Her eyes met his, for just a moment, pleading. Get your coat, Rodriguez said. It's cold out there. As Hayes retrieved her coat, Rex came thundering down the stairs, Benny's shouts following. The dog launched himself at Rodriguez with a snarl of pure rage, only Carter's quick grab of his collar preventing contact. Rex fought against the restraint, barking with a fury Carter had only seen in combat. Aggressive dog, Rodriguez observed coldly. Might have to do something about that. Rex, heel, Carter commanded, though it took all his strength to hold the dog back. Rex knew something, recognized something about Rodriguez that triggered every protective instinct. Hayes paused at the door, looking back at Rex with an expression of profound sadness. Take care of him, she said quietly. He's special. Then she was gone, Rodriguez's hand on her elbow, guiding her to the sheriff's SUV. The deputies followed, but one looked back, marking Carter with his eyes. A promise of future attention. Carter closed the door, his mind racing. The flash drive felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in his hand. Whatever was on it, Hayes had risked everything to get it to him. And Rodriguez wasn't here as a concerned sheriff, he was here as something else entirely. Dad? Benny stood at the top of the stairs. Why did Rex try to bite the sheriff? I don't know, buddy, but that was a lie. Rex knew exactly who Rodriguez was, what he was, and now Carter needed to know too. He waited until the sound of engines faded, then went to his computer. The generator hummed, providing just enough power for essentials. The flash drive slid into the port with a soft click. The files that opened made Carter's blood run cold. Financial records, photographs, audio recordings. Evidence of a corruption ring that went all the way through the sheriff's department, connections to cartels, drug shipments through Millbrook. And at the center of it all, Sheriff Rodriguez. But it was the last file that stopped his heart. A photograph of Officer Trevor Murphy, dated 18 months ago. Standing next to him, his canine partner, a German shepherd with a missing toe, Rex. Another photo. Trevor Murphy's funeral. His widow standing at the graveside. Her face a mask of grief. Joanna Murphy. Now Joanna Hayes. Carter understood now. She'd come here undercover, using her maiden name, investigating her husband's murder. The accident hadn't been an accident, someone had figured out who she was, and Rex. Rex had been Trevor's dog. That's why he recognized her. Why he reacted to Rodriguez with such rage. Rodriguez had killed his partner. The sound of engines returning sent Carter into motion. They were coming back, probably with more men, definitely with violence in mind. He had minutes, maybe less. Benny. His son appeared immediately. Remember our camping game? The one where we hide in the special place? His son's eyes widened, but he nodded. Carter had drilled this with him, a game that was really preparation for the worst. The basement had a hidden room, reinforced, stocked with supplies. Sarah had called him paranoid. He'd called it prepared. Take Rex. Go now. Don't come out until I come get you. Dad. Now, soldier. Benny ran, Rex following, the dog torn between protecting the boy and staying with Carter. Carter grabbed his rifle, his sidearm, extra magazines. His hands were steady, mind clear. This was what he'd trained for, even if he'd never expected to use it in his own home. Through the window, he could see 3 vehicles approaching, spreading out to surround the house. 6 men. Maybe more. Rodriguez wasn't taking chances. Carter took position at the top of the stairs, good sight lines, cover from the walls. The front door exploded inward, Rodriguez's voice booming. Carter Williams, we have a warrant for your arrest. Harboring a fugitive, obstruction of justice. Come out with your hands visible. Show me the warrant, Carter called back. Don't be stupid, soldier. You're outmanned, outgunned. Think about your boy. I am thinking about him. Thinking about what kind of man his father island. The kind who stands up to corruption, or the kind who rolls over when threatened. Silence. Then Rodriguez again, closer now. You don't understand what you're involved in. Officer Hayes is a disturbed individual. She killed another officer. Stole evidence. She's dangerous. Funny how the evidence she stole shows you're on the cartel payroll. Another silence, longer. When Rodriguez spoke again, his voice had changed, the mask completely gone. You've seen the files. Every last one. Then you know how this ends. You can't win, Carter. But you can still save your boy. Send out the drive, and we leave. You never see us again. And Officer Hayes? She made her choice. Carter heard movement, multiple positions. They were preparing to breach. Rodriguez, you killed Trevor Murphy. Rex knows it. Dogs don't forget. A laugh, cold and bitter. Murphy was an idealist. Thought he could change things. Same as his wife. Same as you, apparently. The first shot shattered the window next to Carter's position. He returned fire, controlled bursts, forcing them back. Another window broke, then another. They were probing, testing his positions. Last chance, Williams. Carter's response was 3 rounds through the front door, chest high. Someone screamed, fell heavily. The assault began in earnest then, automatic weapons fire tearing through the walls, showering him with splinters and drywall dust. Carter moved, fired, moved again, using every inch of cover, every angle the house provided. A flashbang came through the broken window. Carter closed his eyes, covered his ears, but the concussion still left him reeling. Boots on the stairs. He fired blind, heard someone fall, roll back down. More shots, closer now. His rifle clicked empty. Transition to pistol, smooth as silk despite the chaos. An attacker appeared at the top of the stairs, rifle swinging toward him. Carter fired twice, center mass. The man fell backward, tumbling down the steps. Another came from the hallway they'd entered through Benny's window. Carter pivoted, fired, but took a round in the shoulder, spinning him back. Pain bloomed, hot and familiar. He'd been shot before, knew he had minutes before shock set in. But minutes were all he needed. Rodriguez appeared in the doorway, weapon aimed at Carter's head. It didn't have to be this way. Yes, it did. The sheriff's finger tightened on the trigger. But the shot that rang out wasn't his. Rodriguez looked down in surprise at the spreading red stain on his chest, then toppled forward. Behind him stood Joanna Hayes, Carter's backup pistol, the one from the hidden safe she'd apparently found smoking in her hands. I couldn't let him win, she said simply. More engines outside. Lots of them. Federal vehicles, FBI, markings visible through the shattered windows. Hayes had gotten word out somehow, probably before Rodriguez grabbed her. The cavalry had arrived, just barely in time. Carter slumped against the wall, pressing his hand to his shoulder. Hayes was beside him instantly, applying pressure with practiced efficiency. Benny's safe, he managed. Basement. Rex is with him. Her eyes filled with tears at Rex's name. I knew he was here the moment I saw him. Trevor loved that dog more than anything. When he died, Rex disappeared from the K9 unit. I always hoped he'd found someone good. He found us. Or we found him. Either way, he's family now. FBI agents swarmed the house, securing scenes, checking bodies. Rodriguez was still alive, barely, being worked on by medics who didn't seem particularly hurried. The other attackers were dead or captured. Benny's voice came from below, muffled but determined. "Dad? Is it safe?" "All clear, soldier." The boy emerged with Rex, who immediately went to Joanna, pressing against her legs, whimpering with what could only be described as joy. She dropped to her knees, burying her face in his fur, sobbing. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the dog. "I'm so sorry I couldn't save him." Rex licked her face, tail wagging, forgiving everything. The aftermath was a blur of statements, medical treatment, federal agents documenting everything. The flash drive contained enough evidence to dismantle the entire corruption ring, reaching into multiple counties. Several deaths, including Trevor Murphy's, finally explained. Carter's shoulder would heal, though it would ache when the weather changed. Rodriguez survived to face trial, though he'd spend the rest of his life in federal prison. The other corrupt officers fell like dominoes, each racing to make deals, to point fingers, to save themselves. But those were just facts, cold and clinical. The real story was in the quiet moments that followed. 6 months later, the snow had given way to summer warmth. Old Creek Bridge had been repaired, the accident site cleaned up, no trace remaining of that terrible night except in memory. Joanna stood at the bridge's railing, looking down at the creek running clear and fast with snowmelt. She wore civilian clothes now, having left law enforcement for a job with the FBI's Denver office. Close enough to visit on weekends. Close enough to matter. "The water's perfect for fishing," Benny announced, already planning expeditions. He'd grown 2 inches, lost another baby tooth, gained a confidence that came from surviving something terrible and discovering his father was exactly the hero he'd always believed him to be. Rex padded between them all, no longer choosing between old loyalty and new family. Joanna had tried to take him when she first left for Denver. But the dog had refused to get in her car, planting himself firmly at Carter's side. The message was clear. This was his pack now, all of them. "You sure about this?" Carter asked, standing close enough that their shoulders touched. The thing between them had grown slowly, carefully, built on shared trauma and mutual respect, evolving into something deeper. "The commute's not bad, the job's good. And..." She looked at Benny trying to teach Rex to fetch sticks from the creek, both of them getting soaked in the process. "This feels right." "It does," Carter agreed. They stood in comfortable silence, watching boy and dog play in the Colorado sunshine. The mountains rose around them, eternal and protective. Somewhere in those peaks, winter was already gathering itself for another assault, but that was months away. For now, there was warmth and peace, and the slow healing that comes from choosing to trust again. Rex bounded over, shaking water everywhere, making Benny shriek with laughter. The dog circled them all, herding them together the way he'd been trained, the way instinct demanded. His pack, his family, his purpose restored. Carter reached over, took Joanna's hand. She squeezed back, a promise and an acceptance all at once. Benny whooped and ran ahead, Rex chasing, their joy echoing off the mountain walls. They followed slowly, in no rush. They'd earned this peace, paid for it in blood and courage. The road ahead wasn't certain, nothing ever was, but they'd face it together. A soldier, a widow, a boy, and a dog who'd brought them all together through the strange alchemy of loyalty and love. Behind them, Old Creek Bridge stood solid and renewed, no longer a monument to near tragedy but a crossing to something better. The creek sang beneath it, constant and eternal, carrying away the last echoes of that terrible winter night when everything changed. Snow would come again, storms would rage, the world would test them. But they'd survived the worst already, found each other in the darkness, chosen hope over fear. Rex had shown them the way, recognizing love even through grief, protecting what mattered most with fierce devotion. As they walked toward home, Joanna found herself thinking of Trevor, how he would have loved this, his dog happy, his wife healing, justice served even if delayed. She could almost hear his laugh in the wind, feel his approval in the warmth of the sun. "Race you home," Benny called, already running. Carter looked at Joanna, eyebrow raised in challenge. She grinned, and they ran, chasing the boy and dog through the meadow grass, their laughter bright and free. Behind them, their shadows stretched long and intertwined, a family drawn together by loss but defined by what they'd chosen to build from it. Rex ran circles around them all, barking with pure joy, his missing toe barely slowing him down. He'd lost his first partner, mourned in his own way, but he'd found purpose again. They all had. Sometimes the greatest gifts came disguised as the worst storms, forcing you to shelter together, to recognize what truly mattered. The ranch house appeared ahead, smoke rising from the chimney. Even in summer, Carter liked to keep one room warm, old habits from cold nights standing watch. It looked the same from outside, but inside, everything had changed. Joanna's touches here and there, Benny's artwork covering the refrigerator, Rex's bed moved to where he could watch all the entrances but also be in the heart of the home. They tumbled through the door in a chaos of laughter and wet dog, Benny immediately raiding the kitchen for snacks, Rex following hopefully. Carter caught Joanna's arm, pulled her close for a moment. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For trusting me that night. For fighting beside me. Thank you for opening your door," she replied. "For giving Rex a home when I couldn't. For showing me that good men still exist." They kissed, briefly, sweetly, a promise of more conversations to come, more healing, more building something from the ashes of what they'd lost. "Gross," Benny announced from the doorway, though his grin suggested he didn't really mind. Rex barked in agreement or hunger, it was hard to tell. They separated, laughing, drawn into the kitchen where Benny was constructing increasingly elaborate sandwiches. Joanna helped, adding vegetables despite Benny's protests. Carter watched them, his heart full in a way he'd thought impossible after Sarah. Outside, clouds gathered over the peaks, but they were summer clouds, bringing life-giving rain, not killing snow. The seasons would turn, as they always did, but this family forged in blizzard and bloodshed would endure. Rex settled at their feet as they ate, his eyes half closed in contentment but his ears still alert, still protective. Once a warrior, always a warrior, but now he fought for joy instead of just survival. They all did. The story could have ended differently with bodies in the snow. With corruption triumphant, with a boy losing his father and a dog losing his second chance. But courage had tipped the scales, love had guided them through the storm, and sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys actually won. As evening painted the mountains purple and gold, they sat on the porch, Benny reading to Rex from his favorite book, Joanna and Carter sharing the swing Sarah had loved. The ghosts were still there. Trevor, Sarah, the men who died that terrible night, but they were peaceful ghosts now, part of the story but not its ending. "Storm coming," Carter observed, watching the clouds build. "We'll weather it," Joanna replied, certain as sunrise. Rex lifted his head, scanned the horizon, then settled back down. No threats, just weather. His family was safe, together, whole. The storm could come. They were ready for it. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and the first drops of rain began to fall, gentle and warm. Benny laughed, holding his hand out to catch them. Rex investigated, snapping at droplets, making them all laugh. They stayed outside until the rain drove them in, then built a fire and settled in the living room. Benny working on a puzzle, the adults reading, Rex stretched between them all, paws twitching as he chased dream rabbits through dream meadows. This was what they'd fought for, what they'd almost lost, what they'd earned through courage and faith in each other. Not a perfect family, those didn't exist, but a real one, tested by fire and stronger for it. Outside, the rain intensified, but inside they were warm, safe, loved. The sound of it on the roof was musical, peaceful, nothing like that killing blizzard months ago. That night had brought them together through tragedy. Now they stayed together by choice. Rex opened one eye, checking on his people, then sighed contentedly and returned to his dreams. All was well. The pack was whole. The storm outside could rage all it wanted. They were home.
The rain hammered against the windows of Sterling Industries' towering headquarters as Marcus Hayes stood in the marble lobby, his worn leather boots creating small puddles on the pristine floor. Victoria Sterling's voice cut through the air like ice, each word dripping with disdain as she circled him like a predator sizing up prey. "You dare show your face here?" she hissed, her designer heels clicking against the floor. "A man like you, thinking you belong in my world?" The security guards moved closer, their hands reaching for Marcus's shoulders. But he stood firm, his weathered hands clenched at his sides, thinking only of the little girl waiting for him at home. Marcus Hayes had not always been the man standing in that lobby. 6 years ago, he had walked away from a life that most men only dreamed of. Trading boardrooms for bedtime stories, corporate mergers for morning pancakes, and international acclaim for the innocent laughter of his daughter Sophie. The transformation had been complete and deliberate, a choice made in a hospital room where he held a tiny bundle of life while machines beeped their final farewell to his wife, Claire. In that moment, as Sophie's tiny fingers wrapped around his thumb, Marcus made a promise that would reshape his entire existence. He would be the father she needed, even if it meant burying the man he used to be so deep that no one would ever find him again. The penthouse apartment became a modest two-bedroom rental in Brooklyn. The designer suits transformed into flannel shirts and jeans, and the name that once commanded respect in 5 languages became just another face in the crowd of parents at Roosevelt Elementary School. Sophie Hayes was 7 years old, with her mother's emerald eyes and her father's determined chin, a combination that made her both beautiful and formidable in the innocent way that only children can manage. She possessed an intelligence that surprised her teachers and a kindness that made her beloved among her classmates. But most of all, she had an unshakable faith in her father that could move mountains. Every morning she would wake up to the smell of scrambled eggs and toast, prepared by hands that she didn't know had once signed deals worth billions. And every night, she would fall asleep to stories told by a voice that had once addressed the United Nations. To Sophie, Marcus wasn't a mystery or a man with secrets. He was simply Dad, the one who braided her hair with patient fingers, who knew exactly how much chocolate syrup belonged in her milk, and who could make any monster under the bed disappear with just his presence. Victoria Sterling ruled her empire from the top floor of a building that scraped the Manhattan sky, a monument to ambition built on the foundation of her father's legacy and expanded through her own ruthless brilliance. At 34, she had achieved what most couldn't in a lifetime, transforming Sterling Industries from a successful company into a global powerhouse that influenced markets on 3 continents. Her beauty was weaponized perfection. From her platinum blonde hair that never had a strand out of place to her wardrobe that cost more than most people's annual salaries. She had learned early that power was the only currency that mattered, and she collected it the way others collected art, displaying it in every gesture, every word, every calculated smile that never quite reached her Arctic blue eyes. Love was a luxury she couldn't afford, kindness a weakness she couldn't tolerate, and mercy a word that had been excised from her vocabulary along with failure and compromise. The world existed to serve her vision, and those who couldn't keep up were simply obstacles to be removed or ignored. The collision of these 2 worlds began on an unseasonably warm Tuesday in October, when Marcus stood outside Sterling Industries with a manila envelope that contained Sophie's medical records and a plea that had cost him more pride than he had left to spare. Sophie needed a specialized treatment that only Sterling Medical, a subsidiary of Victoria's empire, could provide. And the insurance company had denied coverage for what they deemed an experimental procedure. He had exhausted every other option, liquidated what little savings he had managed to accumulate, and even swallowed his pride enough to reach out to old contacts who might remember him, though none had responded. Standing in that lobby, watching the suited executive stream past him like he was invisible, Marcus felt the weight of his choices pressing down on his shoulders. The receptionist, a young woman named Jennifer with sympathetic eyes and a nervous smile, had tried to explain that Miss Sterling didn't take unscheduled appointments, that there were procedures and protocols, proper channels that needed to be followed. But Marcus had learned long ago that sometimes the proper channels were designed to keep people like him, people who looked like him now, from ever reaching the people who could actually help. The confrontation that followed would become legend among the Sterling Industries employees, whispered about in break rooms and discussed in hushed tones over coffee. Victoria had emerged from her private elevator like an avenging angel dressed in Armani, her face a mask of controlled fury at the disruption to her carefully orchestrated day. She took one look at Marcus, at his flannel shirt and worn jeans, at the desperation barely concealed behind his dignified posture, and her lip curled in disgust. "Security," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had never been disobeyed. "Remove this man immediately." But Marcus didn't move. Didn't even flinch when the guards grabbed his arms. Instead, he looked directly at Victoria, and something in his gaze made her pause, though she would never admit it. "My daughter is sick," he said, his voice steady despite the humiliation burning in his chest. "She needs treatment that only your medical division can provide. I'm not asking for charity. I can work for it. Pay it back over time. Please." The please seemed to physically pain him, and Victoria noticed, filing it away as another sign of weakness. Victoria's laugh was crystalline and cruel, echoing off the marble walls like breaking glass. "Work for it?" she repeated, her voice dripping with amusement. And what exactly could you possibly do for Sterling Industries? Do you have any idea who I am? What this company represents? We don't hire people off the street because they have sob stories. She walked closer, her heels clicking a staccato rhythm that sounded like a countdown. Every day, hundreds of people want something from me. Money, jobs, favors, miracles. If I helped every single parent with a sick child, I'd be bankrupt within a month. The employees who had gathered to watch the spectacle shifted uncomfortably, but none dared to intervene. Marcus felt the heat rise in his face, but he kept his voice level. I'm not every parent, he said quietly. I'm one father, asking for one chance. Test me. Give me any job, any task. Let me prove that I'm worth the investment. Victoria studied him for a long moment, and a smile played at the corners of her mouth, but it wasn't kind. It was the smile of a cat who had just noticed that the mouse was willing to play. Fine, Victoria said, her decision surprising everyone, including herself. You want a chance? I'll give you a chance. But not because I believe in you or your little sob story. I'll give you a chance because I think it will be amusing to watch you fail. She turned to Jennifer, who was watching with wide eyes. Put him in maintenance. Night shift. He can start tonight. She looked back at Marcus, her blue eyes glittering with malice. You'll work here for 6 months. If you last that long without missing a single shift, without a single complaint, without causing any problems, I'll consider reviewing your daughter's case. Consider, not guarantee. And if you fail, if you miss even one day, if you're late even once, you leave and never come back. Do we have a deal? The terms were harsh, almost impossible for a single parent with a sick child, and Victoria knew it. She expected him to refuse, to storm out in anger, or break down in defeat. Instead, Marcus extended his hand, his grip firm when she reluctantly shook it. Deal, he said simply. And for just a moment, Victoria felt something she couldn't quite identify, a flicker of something that might have been respect if she had been capable of feeling such a thing for someone so far beneath her station. That night, Marcus reported to the basement of Sterling Industries, where the maintenance supervisor, a gruff man named Earl Patterson, looked him up and down with skeptical eyes. So you're the one who made a scene upstairs, Earl said, handing him a uniform that had seen better days. Miss Sterling called down herself. Told me to give you the worst jobs we got. Said she wants daily reports on your performance. He paused, studying Marcus's face. Look, I don't know what you did to piss her off, but this ain't gonna be easy. The night shift handles all the dirty work, the stuff the day crew won't touch. You sure you want to do this? Marcus thought of Sophie, at home with Mrs. Chen from next door, doing her homework and waiting for his call to say goodnight. I'm sure, he said, and something in his tone made Earl nod slowly. The first night was hell. Marcus cleaned bathrooms that executives had soiled, scrubbed floors that seemed to accumulate dirt faster than he could clean them, and emptied trash bins filled with the remnants of lives far removed from his current reality. His hands, once soft from signing documents, blistered and bled. His back, strong as it was, ached from constant bending and lifting. But every time he wanted to quit, every time the humiliation threatened to overwhelm him, he thought of Sophie's face when he had promised her that everything would be okay. The other maintenance workers watched him with a mixture of pity and curiosity. There was Raymond Cruz, a father of 3 who had been working nights for 5 years, and Dmitry Volkov, a Russian immigrant who spoke broken English but whose eyes held the wisdom of someone who had seen too much. They didn't understand why someone like Marcus, who clearly didn't belong there, would subject himself to this work, but they recognized determination when they saw it. You got kids? Raymond asked during a break on the 3rd night, offering Marcus a cup of coffee from his thermos. When Marcus nodded, Raymond's expression softened. Then you'll make it. We all do what we got to do for our kids. Dmitry nodded in agreement, adding in his thick accent, in Russia, I was engineer. Here, I clean toilets. But my children, they go to good school, have better life. Is worth it, no? Marcus found himself oddly comforted by their acceptance, by the simple understanding that came from shared sacrifice. Victoria, meanwhile, watched from her ivory tower, receiving Earl's daily reports with increasing interest. She had expected Marcus to quit within a week, had bet her personal assistant, James Morrison, $1,000 that he wouldn't last the month. But every morning, Earl's report was the same. Hayes showed up on time, worked without complaint, did everything asked of him and more. She found herself staying late some nights, watching the security monitors as Marcus pushed his cart through the halls, his movements efficient despite his obvious exhaustion. There was something about the way he carried himself, a dignity that the uniform and the menial work couldn't strip away, that nagged at her. She told herself it was simple curiosity, the same interest one might have in watching an ant carry a load 10 times its weight. But sometimes, when she saw him pause to stretch his back or notice the careful way he organized his supplies, she felt that flicker again, stronger now, threatening to become something she couldn't ignore. Sophie, for her part, adapted to the new routine with the resilience that only children possess. She understood that Daddy had to work at night now, that he would be tired during the day, but she never complained. Instead, she became his cheerleader, leaving notes in his lunch bag that said things like, "You're the best daddy in the world, and I love you to the moon and back." She drew pictures of him as a superhero, complete with a cape and muscles, which made Marcus laugh even when his body ached so much he could barely move. Mrs. Chen, their elderly neighbor, had become like a grandmother to Sophie, teaching her to make dumplings and helping with homework while Marcus slept during the day. The arrangement wasn't perfect, but it worked, held together by love and determination and the kind of hope that refuses to die even in the darkest circumstances. 3 weeks into his employment, the first test came. Victoria had arranged for a special board meeting, one that would run late into the night, and she specifically requested that the maintenance crew clean the boardroom while the meeting was in session. It was unheard of, a deliberate humiliation designed to break Marcus's composure. As he entered the room with his cart, 20 pairs of eyes turned to look at him, including Victoria's, which glittered with cruel anticipation. The board members, titans of industry all, looked through him as if he were invisible, continuing their discussion about quarterly projections and market expansions. Marcus moved silently around the room, emptying wastebaskets and wiping down surfaces, his face a mask of professional indifference. But as he worked, he listened, and what he heard made his hands clench around the mop handle. They were discussing a merger that he knew, from his past life, would be disastrous. A move that looked good on paper, but would ultimately cost thousands of jobs and tank the stock within 2 years. Every instinct screamed at him to speak up, to save them from their mistake, but he bit his tongue until it bled, remembering Sophie, remembering his promise. One board member, Harrison Blackwood, deliberately knocked over his coffee as Marcus passed, the hot liquid splashing across the mahogany table and onto the floor. "Clean that up," he said dismissively, not even looking at Marcus. Victoria watched, waiting for the explosion, for the moment when Marcus would break and reveal his true nature. Instead, he simply nodded, got down on his knees, and began cleaning the spill with methodical precision. As he worked, his mind cataloged everything. The nervous tick in Blackwood's left eye that indicated he was bluffing about his division's numbers. The way Victoria's CFO, Nathan Cross, kept checking his phone with increasing anxiety, suggesting problems he wasn't sharing. The subtle alliance forming between two board members who were clearly planning a power play. Information had always been his weapon of choice, and even now, reduced to this, he couldn't help but gather it, store it, analyze it. The meeting continued around him as if he were furniture, and when he finally left, Victoria felt an unexpected disappointment that he hadn't cracked. The next morning, something unusual happened. An anonymous memo appeared on Victoria's desk, written on plain paper with no identifying marks. It contained a brief but devastating analysis of the proposed merger, outlining exactly why it would fail and suggesting an alternative approach that would achieve the same goals without the risks. Victoria read it 3 times, her heart racing as she recognized the brilliant strategic mind behind the words. She called in her security team, demanding to know how someone had accessed her office, but the cameras showed nothing unusual. The memo's suggestions were so compelling that she presented them to the board as her own ideas, and they were unanimously approved. But the question nagged at her. Who had written it? She found herself looking at her employees differently, searching for signs of hidden intelligence. But her gaze kept returning to the security footage of Marcus cleaning the boardroom, his face revealing nothing as chaos swirled around him. As the weeks turned into months, Marcus became a fixture in the Sterling Industries ecosystem, albeit one that existed in the shadows. The night shift workers had accepted him as one of their own, and he found an unexpected camaraderie in their shared struggles. Raymond taught him tricks for making the work easier on his body, while Dmitri shared stories of his homeland that made the long nights pass more quickly. Even Earl had warmed to him, occasionally bringing extra sandwiches that his wife had made, gruffly insisting that Marcus needed to keep his strength up. But it was the small interactions with the day staff that began to shift the atmosphere in subtle ways. Marcus had a habit of leaving the offices he cleaned slightly better organized than he found them, fixing small problems that others hadn't even noticed. A wobbly desk chair would suddenly be stable. A flickering light would be repaired. A coffee maker that had been making strange noises would run smoothly again. The junior executives began to notice these small improvements, and whispers started to circulate about the mysterious night janitor who seemed to have an uncanny ability to fix problems. Jessica Park, a young analyst in the financial department, had been struggling with a complex spreadsheet for days when she came in one morning to find a sticky note on her monitor with a simple formula that solved everything. She had no idea who had left it, but she suspected it was the quiet man she sometimes saw in the early mornings when she came in early. Thomas Wright from IT swore that someone had reorganized his server room in a way that improved efficiency by 30%, but the security footage just showed Marcus cleaning, never touching the equipment. These small mysteries began to add up, creating a legend around the night janitor who might be more than he seemed. Victoria noticed the changes too, though she couldn't quite put her finger on what was different. The building ran more smoothly. Problems were solved before they became crises. And there was a subtle shift in the energy of the place that she couldn't explain. She found herself staying later and later, telling herself it was because of work, but really she was watching, waiting, trying to catch Marcus in the act of being extraordinary. One night she confronted him directly, appearing suddenly in a hallway as he was mopping. "It's you, isn't it?" she said, her voice accusatory. "The memo, the improvements, all of it." "Who are you really?" Marcus looked up from his work, his face carefully neutral. "I'm just a janitor, Miss Sterling," he said quietly. A father trying to earn medical care for his daughter. The simplicity of his response, the quiet dignity in his voice, made her angrier than any defiance could have. "Nobody is just anything," she snapped. "Everyone has secrets." "What are yours?" But Marcus simply returned to his mopping, and after a moment, Victoria stormed off, her heels clicking furiously against the floor. The truth about Marcus's past was both simpler and more complex than Victoria could have imagined. He had once been Marcus Blackstone, the legendary consultant known as the Ghost in corporate circles. A man who could turn failing companies into gold mines and who commanded fees that made even CEOs blanch. He had built his reputation on an almost supernatural ability to see patterns others missed, to understand not just businesses but the people who ran them. His wife, Claire, had been his anchor, the one who kept him grounded when the demands of his work threatened to consume him. They had met in college, when he was just a brilliant kid with big dreams, and she was the artist who saw the world in colors he couldn't imagine. She had supported him through the lean years, celebrated with him during the victories, and when she got sick, he had thrown every resource at his disposal into trying to save her. But cancer doesn't care about money or connections, and in the end, all his success meant nothing. She died 6 hours after Sophie was born, her last words a plea for him to be the father their daughter deserved. The decision to disappear had been instantaneous and irrevocable. Marcus Blackstone died with Claire, and Marcus Hayes was born in a small apartment in Brooklyn, where he learned to braid hair from online tutorials and to make mac and cheese exactly the way Sophie liked it. He had enough money saved to last a lifetime if they lived modestly, but he had chosen to work normal jobs, to give Sophie a normal life, to be present in a way that Marcus Blackstone never could have been. The construction work, the delivery driving, the temporary positions, they were all part of a deliberate transformation, a way of becoming someone new. He had thought he could leave the corporate world behind entirely, but life has a way of circling back. And here he was, cleaning the offices of people who would have paid millions for his advice, all for the chance to save his daughter. 4 months into his employment, Sophie's condition worsened. She had been managing with basic treatments, but the doctors were clear. Without the experimental procedure, she had perhaps a year, maybe less. Marcus stood in the hospital room, watching his little girl sleep, her face pale against the white pillows, and felt rage build in his chest. Not at Victoria or Sterling Industries, but at himself. For choosing pride over pragmatism. For not revealing himself and demanding what his reputation could have commanded. But then Sophie opened her eyes, smiled at him, and said, "Don't look so sad, Daddy. Everything's going to be okay. You promised, remember?" And in that moment, he knew he would continue, would endure any humiliation, would sacrifice every shred of pride he had left. Because she believed in him, and that was worth more than all the corporate victories he had ever achieved. The night that changed everything started like any other. Marcus was cleaning the executive floor, working his way methodically through the offices, when he heard shouting from Victoria's office. Through the partially open door, he could see her on a video call with someone, her face flushed with anger and something that looked almost like fear. "That's impossible," she was saying. "The algorithms are proprietary. No one outside the company even knows they exist." The person on the screen was speaking rapidly, but Marcus couldn't make out the words. Then Victoria said something that made his blood run cold. "If this gets out, if the SEC finds out what we've been doing, it's not just the company that goes down. We're talking about criminal charges. Harrison. Prison." Marcus recognized the name Harrison Blackwood, the same board member who had spilled coffee on him months ago. He was about to move away when Victoria slammed her laptop shut and put her head in her hands. And for the first time since he'd met her, she looked vulnerable, human, scared. Marcus made a decision that would have seemed insane to anyone else. He knocked on the door. Victoria's head snapped up, her vulnerability immediately replaced by fury. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. This floor should have been cleaned hours ago. Marcus entered the office, closing the door behind him. "I couldn't help but overhear," he said carefully. "You have a problem with the Blackwood situation." Victoria stood, her body rigid with tension. "You were eavesdropping? I'll have you fired immediately." "Security." But Marcus held up a hand. "Before you do that, let me ask you something. The algorithm he's talking about, is it the one you use for high-frequency trading? The one that analyzes market patterns in real time and makes microsecond decisions?" Victoria's face went white. "How could you possibly know about that?" Marcus walked to her whiteboard, picked up a marker, and began writing. "Because the vulnerability isn't in the algorithm itself. It's in the implementation. You're using a recursive function that doesn't properly sanitize inputs, which means someone who knows what they're doing could inject false data that would make the algorithm trade against itself." For 5 minutes, Marcus wrote, explaining in precise detail not just the problem but the solution, his hand moving with the confidence of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. Victoria watched in stunned silence as the janitor she had humiliated for months revealed an understanding of complex financial systems that rivaled her best engineers. When he finished, he set down the marker and turned to face her. "You have about 6 hours before Blackwood's people crack the rest of the system," he said quietly. "If you implement these changes now, you can not only stop them but trace the attack back to its source, which will give you the evidence you need to have him removed from the board and potentially arrested for corporate espionage." Victoria stared at him, then at the board, then back at him. "Who are you?" she whispered. Marcus was about to answer when his phone rang. It was the hospital. Sophie had collapsed at Mrs. Chen's apartment and was being rushed to emergency surgery. The next few hours were a blur. Marcus ran from the building, Victoria's shouts echoing behind him. But he didn't care about the job anymore, didn't care about the deal or the consequences. He arrived at the hospital to find Sophie in critical condition, the doctors speaking in hushed, urgent tones about procedures and permissions and insurance that wouldn't cover what needed to be done. He was about to reveal everything, to call in every favor from his past life, when Victoria Sterling walked into the hospital waiting room, flanked by the best medical team money could buy. "Where is she?" Victoria demanded. And when the doctors tried to explain about protocols and procedures, she cut them off with a look that could have frozen hell. "I don't care about your protocols. That girl gets whatever she needs. Sterling Industries will cover everything. And I mean everything." She turned to Marcus, and for the first time, there was no coldness in her eyes, only a strange mixture of respect and something that might have been regret. "We need to talk," she said. "But first, we save your daughter." The surgery took 14 hours. Marcus and Victoria sat in the waiting room, an odd pair, the billionaire CEO in her designer suit and the janitor in his work clothes. As the hours ticked by, Victoria finally asked the question that had been burning in her mind. "Marcus Blackstone. You're Marcus Blackstone, aren't you? The ghost?" Marcus didn't deny it. There seemed no point anymore. "I was," he said simply. "How did you figure it out?" Victoria pulled out her phone, showing him a photograph from a corporate event 8 years ago. A younger Marcus stood next to several industry leaders, his face partially obscured but recognizable if you knew what to look for. "I've been staring at this picture for the past hour," she said. "You consulted for my father once, didn't you? Before he died?" Marcus nodded. "He was a good man. He would be proud of what you've built." Victoria was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Why didn't you just tell me who you were? I would have helped Sophie immediately if I'd known." Marcus looked at her with eyes that held no accusation, only a deep weariness. "Would you have? Or would you have assumed I was a fraud, a has-been trying to trade on past glory? And even if you had believed me, what then?" "I didn't want Sophie to grow up as Marcus Blackstone's daughter, surrounded by wealth and privilege, but never knowing if people cared about her or her father's name. I wanted her to have what I never had, a parent who was there, who chose her over everything else every single day." He paused, running his hand through his hair. "Claire made me promise before she died. She said Sophie would have plenty of people who could give her things, but she needed someone who would give her time. So I became someone who had nothing but time to give." Victoria felt something crack inside her chest, a wall she had built so carefully that she had forgotten it was there. "You gave up everything," she said softly. "For her." Marcus smiled, a sad, gentle smile. "No," he said. "I gained everything. You just don't understand that yet." The doctor emerged at dawn, exhausted but smiling. The surgery had been successful. Sophie would need time to recover, but she was going to be fine. Marcus collapsed into a chair, the relief so overwhelming that he couldn't speak. Victoria watched him, this man who had endured months of humiliation without breaking, finally allowing himself to cry. She thought about her own life, the empire she had built, the respect she commanded, the fear she inspired, and wondered when she had last felt anything as pure as what she was witnessing. "Marcus," she said quietly, "I owe you an apology. Several, actually. The way I treated you, the things I said." But Marcus shook his head. "You were being who you thought you needed to be," he said. "Just like I was. We all wear masks, Victoria. The trick is knowing when to take them off." Sophie woke up 3 days later to find her room filled with flowers, balloons, and more stuffed animals than she could count. But the first thing she saw was her father's face, and her smile was brighter than all the gifts combined. "Hi, Daddy," she whispered. "I knew you'd fix everything." Marcus kissed her forehead, his throat too tight to speak. Victoria stood in the doorway, watching the reunion with an expression that her employees wouldn't have recognized. She had spent the past 3 days not just ensuring Sophie got the best care, but also investigating Marcus's past, understanding the full scope of what he had given up. She had found records of deals worth hundreds of millions, testimonials from CEOs who credited him with saving their companies, and a life of luxury that he had simply walked away from. But more than that, she had found stories of a man who had loved his wife with a devotion that seemed almost mythical in their world of prenups and affairs, and who had transferred that love wholly to his daughter. On the fourth day, as Sophie was sitting up and chatting animatedly about her missing school, Victoria made Marcus an offer. "Come back," she said simply. "Not as a janitor, not even as a consultant. Come back as my partner. Equal equity, equal authority. Help me build something that actually matters." Marcus looked at her in surprise. "Why would you do that?" Victoria was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "Because in the past 4 months, you've taught me something I didn't know I needed to learn. You showed me that strength isn't about power or money or making others feel small. It's about knowing what matters and protecting it, no matter the cost." She paused, then added, "And because you were right about the merger, about the improvements, about everything, Sterling Industries needs someone who sees people, not just profits." Marcus looked at Sophie, who was pretending to sleep but clearly listening. "What do you think, Princess?" he asked. Sophie opened one eye. I think you should do whatever makes you happy, Daddy. But maybe you could work during the day now? I miss our bedtime stories. The news of Marcus's true identity spread through Sterling Industries like wildfire. The employees who had watched him clean their offices were stunned, embarrassed, and in some cases,